Hi there, Dan here, founder of Excel Academy and
Maseeha.
And if you're watching this video, it means that you are part of the CFO South Africa community. If you were at Finance Indaba, you may have seen us. We were very fortunate to be able to run a free Excel efficiency crash course both mornings, and we had about 450 people attending those free presentations, and the response was amazing. So if you were there, thank you. If you weren't, we'll see you next year. But in the meantime, we've got something awesome for you today in this short video. Maseeha, what are we doing today?
We've got something awesome. So join us on our Excel screen where we're going to be showing you 3 mistakes to avoid as a financial modeler.
Okay, so check out our screen now and let's go look at those 3 mistakes. By the way, before we cross over to the screen, as a loyal member of the CFO South Africa community, you do qualify for 10% off a whole bunch of finance training, including our Excel Academy workshops. So if you are interested, then get in touch with us. Our email address is info@excelacademy.co.za. Pop us an email and just quote the code CFO 2018. That'll entitle you to an awesome 10% off our workshops, which are delivered through a gamified blended approach, which we will explain to you in full if you are interested. So without any further ado, let's cross over to our screen. Right, welcome to our Excel screen, and what you see over here is that we've got the Simple Financial Model 3 Mistakes to Avoid workbook open here. Now this workbook is available to you. We've included a link to download this particular workbook. What we recommend is that you do download it, open it up, and follow along with us as we go to get the most value from this short training video. So we've got it open, and Maseeha's sitting next to me. I'm going to ask her, what is the first thing that's logical to do when we open up a brand new workbook?
So usually we save as and rename the workbook, which we've already done. And then the second thing is to just orientate ourselves. So in this workbook, we've got 2 sheet tabs, inputs and calcs. And typically in a financial model, most of you financial modelers will know that we isolate all of our inputs onto their own sheet. So that's the sheet tab that we're going to be working on in this video.
Perfect. Cool. So we're going to be working on the inputs tab, and then in episode 2 of this little training series that we're making available to you for free, we will look at the actual calcs. But today, this video that you're watching here, we want to talk to you about the 3 mistakes to avoid specifically when dealing with inputs in a simple financial model or a complex financial model for that matter. So we're going to start off, and we're actually going to work through these 6 input cells. Some of them are actually calculation cells, but we'll see as we go. So if you, as we said a couple of moments ago, if you were at Finance Indaba, you saw us in action in the Excel efficiency crash course, and we actually used this specific simple financial model workbook. So this might be familiar to you. And what we did was we asked the audience for an annual interest rate to use, and I think the one day we had 10% and the other day 5%. And I think for all intents and purposes here, keep things simple, let's use
10%. Nice round number.
Okay, so we're going to put in 10% over there. Okay, now also, for simplicity, we are assuming that this is a nominal annual compounded monthly interest rate. So when we want to calculate the interest rate monthly, we're going to use a simple calculation of equals, okay, B2 divided by 12. Okay, so it's a simple calculation divided by 12, and the annual effective interest rate would actually be more than 10% because of the effects of compound interest, which we can talk about because you are a very financially literate person watching this video. So this brings us to our first mistake that a lot of people make when dealing with Excel, and more specifically with financial models. What is the first mistake, Maseeha?
Mistake number 1, not formatting your cells. So at the moment, we see that the calculation cell we've done comes up as 0.0083 recurring, which is quite unattractive, and we'd like that to reflect as a percentage. So the first thing to do is to convert that, and we use a quick keyboard shortcut, which is Control-Shift-5. When we hover over the percentage sign on the home tab, Excel actually tells us the shortcut in brackets there, Control-Shift-percentage.
Okay, why does it come up as 1%? 10% divided by 12 would probably be, well, we saw it as 0.83%. It's just rounding off to no decimals, so we're going to increase the decimals over there as many times as we want. We'll leave it at 2 decimals. And on this note of formatting, or where people don't format, we're not only talking about number formatting, but also about cell styles. So actually using different fonts and styles to format specific types of cells in your model in a specific way. And I've been trained as an actuary. When I worked in an insurance company, I was trained that all input cells should be a specific input cell type or cell style, and all calculation or output cells should also be in their own cell style. So we love using cell styles, and what Maseeha has done here is she's gone and changed that calculation cell of the 0.83% to the calculation style, and she's changing the 10% to the input style. Okay, and what that does is it standardizes things. It creates a convention in your specific model, but also across your organization, so that you and your colleagues can all use the same cell style, and that there's a common language, and you can just open up a workbook and at a glance you know exactly what that particular cell is. It also avoids the possibility of somebody trying to punch in a number there, because no one must punch in a number in the 0.83% cell. That's a formula which depends on the input for the annual interest rate. So that avoids a lot of those pitfalls. Isn't that right, Maseeha?
Absolutely, 100%. And so what we're also doing is finishing up the formatting. We're pre-formatting the remaining cells on the input sheet. So we've got 3 input cells and 3 calculation cells. And as we go through them now, you'll see exactly why the remaining 4 cells are either input or calculation cells.
Great stuff. So how long is this loan?
Let's say 20 years. I think that's the standard for a home mortgage, right?
Good.
Okay, then the term in months would be, since there's 12 months in a year, it would be equals to 20 times 12, or equals to cell B4 times 12. Okay, next up, principal amount, another input. Let's go for a nice round number. I think 1 million. Big round number. Can we get a house for 1 million?
Oh, okay, we'll have to be potentially downscaling, apartment living. Okay, so for $1 million, we can see there that this number is also not formatted. And as soon as you're working with large numbers in Excel, it does get confusing, especially when there's a whole bunch of zeros. And just to see at a glance, you can't tell if that's 100,000 or 10 million. So what we'll do is we'll quickly and easily, using a keyboard shortcut, convert that into accounting or currency format. So there is the accounting number format button on the ribbon over there, which a lot of people like to use. Okay, you can do that. I'm going to press Control Z to undo that, because I'm going to use a keyboard shortcut.
Control Shift 4 on your keyboard. You see the $ above the number 4. So that is essentially currency.
Okay, so Control Shift $. Okay, and then for the payment, the monthly installment. Okay, we're going to use a financial function in Excel, and we're going to start off by typing equals PM, and you can see there that PMT comes up, and before Maseeha presses tab, we can see there the tip. It says calculates the payment for a loan based on constant payments and a constant interest rate. She's going to then press the tab key. At this stage, we actually get the arguments that Excel wants over there. We've got rate, N per, PV, and then FV and type are both in square brackets, meaning that they're optional. At this stage, if you don't know what rate means and you actually want guidance, you can click on that FX that Maseeha's just clicked on, which is the function arguments window. This is a step-by-step guide or wizard through the function. Okay, and as soon as you're working with more complex functions, especially here, if you've never seen the term N per, what does N per mean? Okay, it will explain to us as we go. So Maseeha, for rate, what are we going to use?
Starting with rate, the description says it's the interest rate per period for the loan. So per period in this case would be our monthly interest rate. So I'm going to click on cell B3. Next up, N per, the description again says it's the total number of payments for the loan, which in our case we've calculated to be 240, which is in cell B5. Next up, when I click on in the PV box, it says that's the present value, the total amount that a series of future payments is worth now. And so the present value, another way of saying it, is the principal amount, which we've specified in cell B6. And then, like Dan mentioned a minute ago, the last two arguments, FV and type, both appeared in square brackets, meaning that they're optional. So we're going to leave them blank for now.
Yeah, and they actually are not bold. You can see here in this window, we've got rate, NPER, and PV, which are all bolded down the left-hand side, and FE and type are not bolded. So that's another indication that they're not compulsory. And what we see as well is we see the negative answer over there on the right-hand side, as well as the formula results at the bottom left of this dialog box. It says negative 9650. So that's the monthly installment, but why is it coming up with a negative? The reason for that is in financial functions in Excel, there's an opposite sign for money going in and money coming out. Okay, so what you always need to keep in mind, you can see it very clearly if you actually draw out a timeline on a piece of paper, but there's money invested and then money returned, or vice versa. And what we're going to do to solve that problem is Maseeha is going to pop a little negative sign before the B6 over there. So it's negative 1 million, and there we get the answer. Okay, so our monthly installment or monthly payment is 9,650. So that's fantastic. And our input sheet is now formatted really well. We've got our 3 input cells, which we can see very clearly. And then we have our 3 calculation cells with the gray background and the orange text. So we, as I mentioned, we really do encourage that you use some kind of convention and standardize the way your cells are formatted in all of your models. So that is mistake number 1, to avoid formatting your cells. Mistake number 2. Okay, Maseeha, before we jump on to mistake number 2, what's that cool secret weapon that we teach in Excel 101, which is what we call X-ray goggles, to actually see what's going on behind the scenes of all these cells?
Excellent. That's called show formulas. So if we go to the formulas tab, or we just use the keyboard shortcut, Control tilde, or we actually say Control squiggle. So on our keyboard, we've pressed Control tilde, and we've now just pointed to it with our mouse as well to the show formulas button. That actually shows us the formula rather than the result for each cell on our spreadsheet.
Okay, excellent. So here we can see the formulas, and for input cells we can actually see unformatted. You can see it says 0.1, and then it's got no formatting whatsoever. It just shows us the raw values or the formulas in that particular cell. To get out of this mode, this is just a mode, this button has been switched on, you can see over there. To turn it off, it's not escape, it's Control tilde once again, or Control squiggle. So it turns it on and off. Now, the reason I wanted to show you this is because here you've got a formula which says equals B2 over 12. Here you've got B4 times 12, and here you've got a PMT function with 3 references over here. But these references are all cell references in Excel. They are not very descriptive. They're a little bit cryptic, and especially if you're using formulas which refer to other sheet tabs, it results in quite a headache to try and make sense of the formulas and the references. So what we strongly encourage is avoiding this mistake. It's not really a mistake, it's more of a just a convention. Another habit that we really encourage people to get into is to name cells and name ranges. So we're going to start off by showing you how do we name cell B2. If we go from top to bottom, this is the annual interest rate, which we could name by manually typing the name in the name box over here. But alternatively, what we encourage you to do is to use this button on the formulas tab, which is define name. When we click on that, we get a little dialog box which says new name. It's auto-populated the name based on what's on the left-hand side here. You can see it's got interest rate underscore annual, and it's referring to inputs $B, $2. When we click OK, you can see in the name box we've got interest rate annual, but our formula just underneath still says B2 divided by 12. So it's almost like on a map. The one is a GPS location, the other is a saved point of interest. They both will get you to the same place, but it's much easier to use the point of interest. So in this case, we can double click here on the actual formula. We can double click on the B2 reference, and we can overwrite it by clicking on B2 once again. And there it puts in interest rate annual instead of B2. It's also blue, same color coding, okay, and it will give us the same answer when we press enter.
Much better.
Okay, so Maseeha, when I press Control squiggle now,
That's going to look much better than it did a minute ago. So it's now saying equals interest rate annual divided by 12, rather than saying equals B2 divided by 12. Okay, so now we're all convinced that naming cells is good. But wait, there's more. Okay, so if we wanted to now name every cell on this sheet in column B, rather than doing them one by one like we did with define name, there's actually a quicker way to do it. What we're going to do for the 5 cells below cell B2 is we're going to highlight all of the cells in column B as well as the descriptions in column A next door. Because column A has the name that we want to give to the cell in the corresponding row in column B. Once we've highlighted all of it, we go to the button called Create from Selection in the Formulas tab, or use the keyboard shortcut Control-Shift-F3. And that's going to automatically generate names from the selected cells. So if we press Control-Shift-F3 now, we get this pop-up box saying create names from values in the, and left column is ticked. Okay, that is correct because our descriptions do appear in the left column. So we say okay. And now it looks like nothing's happened until we hover on one cell or stand on one particular cell and we look at the name box. There we have it. So if we stand on 0.83% and we look at the name box, it's changed that to interest rate monthly, the corresponding description in column A.
Okay, thank you, Maseeha. And just once we've done this, in a similar way to the way we changed the formula in cell B3, which now says interest rate annual over 12, okay, we can do a similar type of thing here in cell B5, which says equals B4 times 12. But this time, instead of editing what we've got, we can actually delete that. Okay, we're getting an error now because there's nothing there in cell B5, but we'll populate it by saying it's equal to, and I'm going to go up one cell to B4, and there you can see it automatically puts it as term in years. Or I can press escape and I can say equals TER, and there I see a bunch of names and a bunch of function names. So I can go to term in years, press down arrow key, and then press tab, term in years. Okay, and then I multiply that by 12. Okay, and there we go, there's my 240 months. Okay, and then last but not least, we can edit the PMT function by saying B3. We can overwrite with interest rate monthly. B5 I can double click on and overwrite it with term in months. And negative B6 I can overwrite by double clicking on B6 and replacing that with the reference over there, which is the principal amount PV. Same color coding. Once again, we see blue, red, purple, but when we press Control squiggle or Control tilde, you can see a whole bunch of formulas which actually have names in, and they are speaking to us in English, a lot more user-friendly, and your colleagues and clients will be much more chuffed working in a spreadsheet like this. What I want to show you just before we show you the third mistake is if you are in another sheet tab, for example, or anywhere in your workbook, and you quickly want to navigate, you see a formula that refers to the interest rate, you want to see what it is, you click on the little down arrow in the name box, and this is like going to your favorite places on your GPS, on Google Maps, for example. You want to see what the interest rate monthly is, you click there and it takes you to that cell. It's not very easy to do that if you don't have named ranges, so it's another reason to avoid mistake number 2, which is to not have these named ranges. So really get into the habit of naming cells. Another alarm bell for you is if you ever see a spreadsheet or a model that has references to cells, relative references like these were, or absolute references with dollar signs. You can rather replace it with named references. And the good news is you also don't even need to worry about the dollar signs. They come built in with your named references in case you are wondering. Okay, let's move along to mistake number 3. Maseeha, what happens if somebody broke this model? We set it up perfectly, we thought it was perfect, but unfortunately somebody decided to punch in a weird and wonderful interest rate or something that's not even a number. What would happen?
So if we want to avoid something bad from happening, what we need to do is limit the values that people can enter. So for example, for an interest rate, we wouldn't want someone to put in 200%, for example. Typically, our interest rates would be, say, up to 30%. So a really cool thing that we can use is called data validation. That allows us to limit the values that any user can input. So if we now go to the data tab and we go to data validation, we see that description there. Pick a list of rules to limit the type of data that can be entered in a cell. So if I now click on that button, data validation, for cell B2, at the moment, Excel says allow any value. Maybe we decide that we only want to allow values which are from 0 to 30%. So we would not want to allow any value, but rather allow a decimal between a minimum of 0, because I can't have a negative interest rate, and a maximum of 30% or 0.3.
Yeah. Technically, you probably could have a negative interest rate if the bank is paying you to take their money, but we'll assume that that's not the case here. So we're going to put it between 0 and 0.3. Another thing we could do is we could make those two values variables in our spreadsheet. If we wanted to make it that you could change the minimum and maximum, we could, I think the formal word for it is parameterize it, make it parameters so that you can actually edit those limits. But we're going to keep things simple for now. We'll just plug them in as 0 and 0.3, which is 30%, and then click OK. What that means is if we try to punch in something that doesn't fit, for example, an interest rate of 40%, there we go. You can hear that tone and you can see the message which says the value doesn't match the data validation restrictions defined for the cell. We can retry, and as soon as we do something that's more within the bounds, say 25%, there we go, there's no issue whatsoever. Now, there are actually two other features within this tool of data validation which are really useful. The first that I want to mention is the input message, which is almost like a prompt. And this helps you, and it helps the users of this model to understand what they need to do and to avoid any confusion or frustration, because otherwise you'll have somebody who is trying to enter a value here, but they don't know why they're getting an error. So, Maseeha, what do you think is a good title and input message to put here?
So we could say for the title, beware, and for the input message, we could say you need to enter a value between 0 and 30%. Okay, and then we can say, okay, nice.
Okay, now that message goes away unless we are actually standing on the cell or hovering our mouse cursor. In fact, hovering the mouse cursor doesn't actually activate it. Only when you click on the cell does it give you that input message. And this is different to a comment. A comment in a cell you can get to by pressing Shift F2. And there we go. It gives me the opportunity to type in a comment. It is quite big and clunky. It is adjustable. Okay. It also comes up with that red flag over there, and a comment will be readable if you just hover your cursor. Okay. If you want to get rid of a comment, you press Shift F2 again, and you just click on the outside of it and press delete. So it becomes like an object. But we like to stick to input messages on data validation, typically for financial models like this. Okay, and the last thing I want to show you is in the data validation window, the error alert. Okay, you can actually customize your own error message so that it tells more of a story and tells the user why they are getting an error. So for this example, we can put a title of, we can say invalid interest rate, and then we can type a little message.
Okay, so we could type in invalid interest rate, and we could say, please make sure to use an interest rate between 0 and 30%. Brilliant.
Okay, so when we do something wrong, we make a boo-boo and we say 31%. Okay, there we go. Invalid interest rate. You can see a much more customized error message. We could have even customized the red cross over there, but it says please make sure. So at least the user will know what has gone wrong. So if we change it to 21%, there we go. It's working perfectly. So just to recap, Maseeha, what were those 3 mistakes that we highlighted and described and showed people how to avoid in this video?
Mistake number 1, don't leave your cells unformatted. Use nice, for example, percentage formatting, and also use cell styles for input and calculation cells.
Mistake number 2, we talked about not using named cells or named ranges. It's going to put you at a big disadvantage when you're creating a model or trying to understand a model. So always use named ranges, especially in financial models. And then mistake number 3, which is the one that we just did, is use the tool which is called
data validation to limit the range of entries allowed in a particular cell.
Okay, so from Dan and Maseeha here at Excel Academy at our headquarters here in Johannesburg, we are all done for this tip for today. We both hope that it added a lot of value and that you got some good tips and tricks here and that you'll use these principles when you are busy with your financial models. Just a quick recap, you will be receiving episode 2 in this series from us very shortly, where we're actually going to build the calculation side of this model with you. So stay tuned. And what we recommend you do is actually save this workbook now in a safe place. And you might want to press F12 on your keyboard. Okay. And what that lets you do is it lets you save as, obviously with a different name. Okay. So I might want to call this 1. In brackets. Okay, press enter, and then you can always come back to it at a later stage. And what else did I want to mention? I wanted to remind you about the CFO 2018 discount on our Excel workshops. If you are getting in touch with us, if you do need to upskill yourself or your team, we had a lot of people coming up to our stand at Finance in Durban telling us that their Excel skills are great, but they want to train up their teams because their teams are really weak, and there's a lot of need for upskilling when it comes to basic Excel stuff or pivot tables, VLOOKUPs, advanced data analysis, macros, VBA. We cover all of this and more in our 3 Excel workshops, which are available on demand online with virtual support. We're very, very excited and proud of our gamified, blended approach to learning and to Excel training. And we're seeing great results. Our online workshops were not working. People were just not completing them. And this year, we've really got the recipe right with pretty much 98 or 99% completion rates on our online workshops. So if you are interested, check out our website or get in touch with us, info@excelacademy.co.za. You and your team do qualify for that 10% discount. Anything else from your side, Maseeha?
We look forward to hearing from you soon. Happy financial modeling. Ciao for now.